Emma was 16 when she met Riley on the football field, where she was a junior cheerleader and he was a wide receiver 2 years her senior. When they first started dating, Riley was the perfectly polite young suitor who Emma's parents were initially happy with. But that soon changed. Emma's friends knew that Riley's escalating controlling behavior wasn't healthy, and they urged her to dump him. He was telling her how to dress and how to act. He would stand outside of her workplace for hours waiting. Originally, Emma was convinced her friends were wrong about him, but she quickly got tired of making excuses for Riley's bad behavior. They would reunite, then rupture, then rebound again many times over their 2-year relationship, until she ended it for good. It started when Emma was at a party with her friends celebrating the Bobcats' football victory that day. Emma had only been there for a short while when she got a text message that read,
"Go to your car with your keys. Go alone."
It was from an unknown number. "Who is this?" Emma asked. Emma found her friend Zach and he accompanied her out to her car to see what was going on. They didn't see anyone or anything, so they returned to the party. Emma immediately got another text.
"What part of alone wasn't clear?"
Emma responds, "Yeah, I'm not, 'cause I don't know who this is." The messages suddenly turned threatening.
"I don't want to have to hurt a loved one."
What? Emma couldn't believe it. It had to be a joke.
"I've got someone you love. If you don't comply, I will hurt them. If you tell anyone about this, I'll hurt them still."
Emma thought someone was pranking her and decided to call their bluff. "Show me."
"No pictures. Stop playing around and do as I say. Drive to the bottom of the driveway. If you don't by 11:50, I will hurt them. Bring no one."
Emma became suspicious that she knew who was behind the messages. Her ex, Riley. "I know you're one of Riley's friends, but stop."
"I won't harm you. Just do as I say and he won't be hurt."
Emma wanted this to stop. "I'll just call the cops. I know you're Riley's friends. I'm not stupid and you won't hurt him. I'm blocking you."
"I'm no one's friend. We have him now. You have until 11:50.
"I know Riley put you up to this. I'm not dumb."
"We have him currently. He hasn't put anyone up to anything. If you are okay with him getting hurt, that is your choice."
"I'm blocking you. This is BS."
"You may want to answer his call. We're letting him have his phone to call anyone before we hurt him. 4 minutes, call the police, and he dies."
Emma didn't answer.
"You've made your choice. If you like to hear his crying and screams, give him a call."
At 12:17 a.m., she got another message.
"He's in the ditch beside her house. It's a shame you can all of a sudden not value someone's life. You may want to check on him. Since you don't care, just let him lay there. He was unconscious when we left him."
Emma and Zach went outside for another look. They found Riley laying face down at the edge of the yard. They were soon joined by Emma's friends who weren't buying Riley's act and thought he was faking. Emma asked Riley what he was doing there. Riley acted confused as he sat up, holding his head. "I don't know how I got here. I was kidnapped." She wasn't lying when she said she wasn't stupid, but Emma didn't read danger into the situation. She just thought it made him look pathetic. She wanted him to leave her alone, but she would get one last text from the unknown number that night.
"That was your warning. We will be back. Next time, it will worsen. Humiliation is fun too, and watching you make him out to be a crazy person made our night. See you soon."
Emma didn't reply. The following day went unusual for Emma. She went to school and afterwards went home to change clothes before heading out to help her mom with volunteer work at the local elementary school. As she was changing, she noticed the man walking down the middle of the street. She couldn't see his face, but she could see him crossing the lawn toward her front door. Emma was alone and didn't know what to do. There was only one person close enough to come to her aid. Emma texted Riley. "I'm shaking and crying. I hate you, but I need you right now." Riley. I'm coming. I'm speeding. Just give me a minute. Emma's mom, Jill, became concerned when she didn't show up as planned, so she drove home to see what was keeping her. She found Emma in the driveway being confronted by Riley. This angered and concerned Jill, who had banned Riley from their home after their last breakup. She ordered him to leave. Emma seemed rattled, genuinely afraid, and this worry was transmitted to her parents. But there were no further incidents that evening, and the family turned in for the night. In the middle of the night, a loud noise woke Emma's father, Mark. Then it happened again. Mark got up to investigate. It had sounded like a slamming door, but nothing seemed amiss in the house, so he assumed it was his son and returned to bed. The next morning, Mark was the first one out of the door for work, as was usual. Later, Jill woke up the kids for school. Her mom went to check on Emma and got no response. Emma didn't seem to hear her shouts and wouldn't open her eyes when shaking her. Emma didn't appear to be breathing. Jill rushed to call emergency services. She was frantic by the time the call was answered, crying and talking so fast in her effort to summon her before it was too late. She told the operator that Emma was unresponsive and was transferred to paramedics. By the time she was put through, Emma's mother knew the truth. She was unresponsive, and she's gone. Police began to investigate the crime scene and soon discovered 2 bullet holes in Emma's bedroom walls. That was the 2 banging door sounds her father had heard in the night. Following the trajectory, police recovered 2 bullet casings in the yard outside Emma's bedroom. When asked who would want to hurt Emma, her parents immediately thought of one person: Riley. Riley took to all major social media platforms to tell the world of his great loss, his great pain, his great troubles, and to amp up the sympathy and attention, he put himself in the hospital overnight. While pouring his heart out to his best friends, Noah and Alex, he shows them the gun he had stolen from his grandfather, the gun he lied about having, but Riley was quick to reassure them that the gun was for protection, and that's all. Ever since he was kidnapped and left for dead in a ditch, he just didn't feel safe. The gun provided that security. Alex and Noah shared their growing suspicions with detectives, who were interested to learn of the gun theft. The 2 boys agreed to surreptitiously record Riley talking about the gun and were ready to step in when Riley asked his friends to help him get rid of it. Police arrested Riley as he was about to ditch the gun in the Tennessee River and brought him into questioning. Riley's lies were exposed when he was confronted with the recordings. Those recordings would be played in court. Riley admitted to shooting Emma, but claimed he had never meant to hurt her. Like all his other stunts, he claimed he only intended to scare her so she would seek his guidance and protection, as she had before. Like his peers, the jury must have thought he was a poor actor, as it took them only 4 hours to find him guilty of first degree and stalking. He was sentenced to life in prison. When Gypsy Rose was just a child, she had many different illnesses, ranging from muscular dystrophy, leukemia, seizures, vision/hearing loss, and the list goes on. Thankfully, her mother Dee Dee was always there for her. The mother and daughter were beloved by their community. Even Habitat for Humanity built a house for them to aid with Gypsy's needs. For years, she would be on treatment, undergo surgeries, and be on medication, even sleeping with a breathing machine to help with her sleep apnea. But something strange was going on that nobody was aware of. You see, Gypsy Rose was always in a wheelchair despite being able to walk. And ever since she was a kid, she was fed through a tube, but never actually needed one. The person with the illness was never Gypsy Rose. It was her mother, Dee Dee, who made up all these disorders and lied to her own daughter her entire life. It started when she was an infant, spending time in a neonatal intensive care unit. At 8 years old, she fell off her grandfather's motorcycle and injured her knee. Although it was nothing serious, Dee Dee forced her to stay in a wheelchair so it wouldn't get worse. It wasn't until they moved to Missouri that neurologist Dr. Flasterstein realized that she doesn't have muscular dystrophy, and he suspected Gypsy Rose was the victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Her mother was making up everything and put her own daughter through so much pain when she was actually healthy. Her teeth were rotting from the anti-seizure medication, and when he confronted her about past medical records, Dee Dee said all the documents were destroyed alongside their old home during Hurricane Katrina. Feeling attacked, Dee Dee made a mental note not to see Dr. Flasterstein anymore, and unfortunately, the neurologist didn't pursue this case further. Fast forward a couple years, Gypsy Rose, now 19, had been suspecting for a while that she never had any diseases and needed someone to save her. She would sneak out and ask the neighbor for help to bring her to the hospital. But Dee Dee would always intercept and convince them that her daughter had brain damage and didn't know what she was talking about. Without hesitation, people believed the mother, and Gypsy Rose found it impossible for anyone to listen. It got worse when one day she escaped to meet a guy at a sci-fi convention she had been chatting with online, and Dee Dee caught them together in a hotel room. Enraged, she smashed her computer, threatening her daughter that she will use the hammer on her fingers if she ever tried to escape again. For the next 2 weeks, Gypsy Rose was chained to her bed. Her fear of Dee Dee was at its peak, and she became desperate. During the night when her mother fell asleep, Gypsy Rose would go online to a dating website, and that is when she met Nicholas Goldjohn. He was a 23-year-old with multiple personalities and had a criminal record for indecent exposure. Her relationship with Nicholas grew quickly, and for over a year, they would message each other secretly on Facebook. Soon after, Gypsy Rose told him about the possibility of killing her mother and asked if he would help. In her mind, this was the only way to be free. Nicholas agreed, and he clearly wanted a future with Gypsy Rose and was willing to carry out that plan. It was June 2015. Nicholas came from Wisconsin to her house that night. They met at the door, and Gypsy Rose handed him a knife, duct tape, and gloves. Still asleep, he crept up to her bed, and it happened. Dee Dee screamed her daughter's name that she was being stabbed in the back. Gypsy Rose hid in the bathroom and covered her ears until it was all over. Dee Dee Blanchard was dead. They took about $4,000 that her mother had stashed away, and the two left the house in the middle of the night, believing they got away with their crime. Friends of Dee Dee had become worried when her Facebook account posted this message shown on their news feeds. The police obtained a search warrant and found Dee Dee's body inside along with the wheelchairs, but Gypsy Rose was missing. A neighbor of theirs knew she had a secret Facebook account, and the police were able to get Facebook to trace the IP address and found them in Wisconsin, where they surrendered and was arrested. The media covered the Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose story and the truth about her faking her daughter's illnesses. And they also found out that Dee Dee had been collecting thousands of dollars from foundations and disability checks from the government all these years. The two went on trial, and the jury had decided their fate. Gypsy Rose Blanchard accepted a plea bargain and was sentenced to 10 years in jail. And Nicholas Goldjohn, who committed this act, was sentenced to life in prison. How did this man who lived in a 19-room mansion, worked as an accountant in a bank, and was a Sunday school teacher living a seemingly good life, suddenly take the lives of his entire family and disappear for 18 years? This is the story of how detectives finally caught John List after nearly 2 decades. It was 1971. John was in his late 40s when he found himself under a mountain of debt and lost his accounting job. He was skimming money from his mother's bank accounts to pay for the mortgage while fearing that he can no longer support his family. He went bankrupt, but refused to go on welfare and didn't want his family to suffer in poverty. So he decided the only solution was to take the lives of his wife, 3 kids, and his own mother. In his words, "I did it to save their souls." He placed their bodies in sleeping bags, lining them up together in the ballroom. Immediately after, he wrote a 5-page confession letter to his pastor. The youngest one struggled a lot, and I'm sure many will say, how could anyone do such a horrible thing? But after it was over, I said some prayers for them all. That was the least I could do. He sent notes to the kids' schools saying that the family will be in North Carolina for several weeks to visit their sick grandmother. He closed all bank accounts, taking the rest of his mother's money, and stopped all mail, milk, and newspaper deliveries to the mansion. John lowered the thermostat in the house, played church music from the radio, and left to start a new life. Because John's plan was so methodical and his family was very reclusive in the first place, for over a month, nobody noticed anything. It wasn't until the neighbors saw the lights in the house burn out weeks after and realized it still hadn't been fixed, and they finally grew suspicious. The teachers also realized that the kids haven't returned to class and felt something was off. Police was called, and the investigation of John List and his family began. December 7th, 1971. Law enforcement entered the mansion through an unlocked window. Immediately, they felt how cold the place was and saw the bodies in the ballroom. They were all decomposing at this point. There was a trail of dried up blood leading to the bathroom. It looked like John didn't do that well when cleaning up the crime scene and left the mop and bucket inside the shower. The organ music was still playing, and soon after, they found the 5-page confession letter to his reverend. Police checked all around the room, and inside one of the drawers was the revolver and handgun he used. John List also meticulously cut out his face in every family photo. They found his car parked at the Kennedy National Airport, but there was no evidence of him boarding any flight. The detectives had no lead, and John List had disappeared without a trace. 1989. Although it's been nearly 2 decades, the New Jersey police never gave up on this case. Newspapers with his face continue to appear with the headline, "John List Still Not Found After This Many Years." It was possible he took his own life, but he could have also started a new one far away. Around this time, a show called America's Most Wanted was airing its first season and garnered a huge audience. That's when detectives contacted John Walsh, the creator of the show, in hopes to get this case on television. The plan was to tell the world about John List's crime and get someone to call in with information on his whereabouts. However, the last picture they had of him was from 1970. Nobody knew what he would look like 18 years later. That's when they hired Frank Bender, a master in forensic sculpting, to create a bust of an old John List. Forensic psychologists were also very important in helping Bender imagine List's new look. He carefully analyzed the man's entire history, his upbringing, his fears, and his genetics through pictures of his parents. And after many hours, the physical bust of John List was complete. It featured his hawk nose, receding hair, wrinkles, the sagging cheeks, and even the same scar behind his ear. Frank Bender also theorized that John List would still be wearing thick glasses, as it reminded him of his younger, wealthy self. To finish off his clay sculpture, Bender put on a pair of dark-rimmed frames different from the ones before he became a fugitive. And on May 29th, 1989, the John List episode aired on America's Most Wanted to over 20 million households. 9 days later, John List was arrested. His neighbor Wanda was watching the episode when she noticed some very striking similarities. An accountant, glasses, man in his 60s with the same facial features as that of the bust, and a churchgoer. She called the show's tip line phone number just in case. Bob Clark, an accountant living in Richmond, Virginia, remarried to a woman named Dolores Miller, whom he met at a church gathering. Robert Peter Clark, real name, John List. When confronted by detectives, he denied ever knowing such a man, but the evidence was all there. His fingerprints matched the ones on the firearms he used. And magnificently, he wore the exact same thick-rimmed glasses that Frank Bender had put on the bust. His new wife, Dolores, told her story of how they met, and after finding out the truth, she divorced him immediately. For months, he kept denying it. But on February 16, 1990, List confessed to his true identity. 18 years ago, he parked his car at the JFK airport, but instead of taking a flight, he took a train to Denver, Colorado to start another life under his new name. With everything finally revealed, he went on trial and the judge sentenced him to life in prison. In an interview in 2002, they asked List, "Why didn't you take your own life?" His answer? "Doing that would have barred me from heaven, as I wanted to reunite with my family." Some final facts that I found out while researching this story was that the name of the mansion, Breeze Knoll, was burned down 9 months after the crime by an unknown group, and destroyed along with the home was a stained glass skylight said to be a Tiffany original that was worth $100,000 in 1970. In present day, this would be worth about $680,000, and this amount of money would have cleared John List's debt. John Walsh, the host of America's Most Wanted, donated Frank Bender's physical bust to a forensic science exhibit which can now be seen inside the Alcatraz East Crime Museum in Tennessee. It was a really busy night, and I was delivering pizza without any time to pause or even take bathroom breaks, when all of a sudden the urge to go pee hit me all at once. I pulled up to the next house and it was an area I delivered in before, so I could immediately see that something wasn't right. All the lights were off in the house, not even the glow of a television or anything. The block was dead quiet. I called the number the customer provided and the voice on the other end said, "Yeah?" She sounded out of breath. "Hey, it's your pizza out front, but there doesn't appear to be anybody home." "Yeah, I'm not home." I had to pee so badly that I was much less patient than I'd otherwise be with a customer right out the gate. "Well, then we're going to have to terminate the order because I've arrived in the stated delivery window and you were supposed to pay in cash, so I don't know what to tell you." I instantly regretted letting my bladder do the talking for me, but she responded, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was running down the street so I could barely hear you. I knew you were coming. Please don't leave. I'm starving. 5 minutes tops, okay?" Well, now I felt bad for snapping at her. No, my bad. No need to rush. See you when you get here." The safest bet was to use a bush in front of the woman's house. She wasn't home and the street light was out so no one would see me. I scurried over to the tallest bush in her front yard, about 4 feet from her door. I looked both ways, unzipped, and finally, thank God. After the initial millisecond of relief, I noticed the sound was way off. I started panicking, thinking I'd aim wrong, but once I started, I can't stop midstream, so I kept squinting into the darkness to see if maybe I was hitting a rock or something and could just move a few inches over. All of a sudden, I heard a way more concerning noise. What the fuck? Before I could turn around, assuming I'd been caught by a neighbor, a man came leaping out of the bushes. He blew past me, brushing my golden shower off him as he spit pretty emphatically on the ground. I think I might have beamed him right in the face. I didn't remember what he was saying because I was still in shock, but after a few minutes, I do remember hearing a car screech out from a bit further away. I was so frozen that I didn't even put my junk away, and I just stood there, trying to figure out what had happened. That man was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree weather. That was a bad man. You're in a bad situation, I said to myself. I turned on the flash on my phone and tried to peer around the line of shrubbery. And that is when I saw the bag. There was a tattered drawstring bag sitting behind the bushes. Once I maneuvered it over and pulled it open, I saw a sharp knife, a roll of duct tape, and a bottle of pills. I dropped the bag, booked it across the street, and slammed the pedal before the door was even closed all the way. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour store. Who do I call first, the police or the girl? But then I thought, what if the girl on the phone was just a decoy to get me there to rob me? She called me out of breath, she wasn't home, the whole thing was off. I called 911 and the operator assured me that someone would be there soon. My rational mind said the odds of her being a decoy girl for some large scam targeting pizza guys were low, and the odds of her being an intended victim were a lot higher. I took 911 off mute and told them I had returned to look for the girl. They weren't happy about that, but I saw her meandering past the parked cars and in the street looking to see if one was mine. I waved her down and I kept whispering, "Get in! Get in! Oh, you want me to get the pizza from the back? Look, there was a man in your bushes. I'm on the phone with the police. I don't know where he is right now. Just please get in the car so we can lock the doors." I thought that was why she got in the car with no further explanation, but it turns out that wasn't entirely it. "You still there? Is she with you?" 911 kept checking in, not knowing who the third party I was talking to was. I reassured them, and we drove more cautiously this time to a location the police instructed us to wait as to speak with the police after they cleared the area. They came pretty soon after, and I gave them a statement telling them everything I observed. It turns out the reason she got into a strange pizza guy's car without probing any deeper into the story is because she knew who the man was right away from my description. She had a psycho ex-boyfriend who was apparently crazy enough that he immediately came to mind from hearing, "There's a guy in your bushes." She later called us to thank me and insisted to leave a huge tip. That was easily one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me, on the job or off. So to that crazy ex-boyfriend in the bushes that I accidentally peed on, let's not meet again. When I was 9 years old and my older brother was 14, we were at the location of what would have been the scariest night of my life. That day, our mother had given us about $30 to go to a movie and maybe get food afterwards. After watching the movie, it was getting pretty dark and I was ready to go home. But my brother wanted to get something to eat first, so we agreed to walk to a McDonald's only a couple blocks from the theater. On our way there, we were stopped and approached by a man. He had a friendly smile plastered on his face, and he was holding his child's hand. "Hey, do you two think you could give my son and I a hand real quick?" he asked. "We need help loading a mattress onto the back of our truck. The truck is over there, up the road." "Sorry, but we don't really have time," my brother said. It was at this time I noticed the little boy. He was about 8 years old and he looked abnormally thin. He had a blank expression on his face and wore clothes that were much too big for him. I turned my attention back to the man, who was now mumbling to my brother about how it would only take a second. My brother kindly declined again. But being the helpful kid that I was, I joined in with the man and tried to persuade my brother that we should help them out. I turned to him, who was now staring at the little boy. My brother had a disturbed expression on his face as he looked down on the child. The child stared back at my brother blankly. "I think that's my mom over there," He pulled me, and we began walking away from the stranger. Again, I didn't understand what was going on, and why my brother had just lied about our mom being there. He didn't let go of his hand and practically dragged me until we were a far distance away from the man and his son. I looked back and could still see the man holding his son's hand, only now, he wasn't smiling anymore. He had a look of fury on his face, and he yanked the little boy by the arm and they walked away. I pulled away from my brother's grasp and bombarded him with questions. He shushed me and pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. He dialed in the number and began pacing around nervously while talking on the phone. I remember the police showing up and my mom came soon after. She took me home, but my brother was left with the police. I asked my mother what was going on, and she said that the police were just questioning my brother because that man we had encountered was dangerous. That was all she told me, so I just went to bed. It wasn't until a few days ago that these memories flooded back into my mind. I decided to call my now 22-year-old brother to get some answers. My brother told me that while the man was constantly trying to convince us to come with him, he happened to look at the little boy, then looked at my brother with his eyes filled with terror and mouthed the words, "I'm not his son. Please help me." His expression went back to being completely blank, almost as if he had never said anything at all. This was why he became so freaked out and snatched me away. When he called the police, they hurried down and he described the man the best he could. Unfortunately, they couldn't do much with the little information my brother had given, because we hadn't even seen the car the man supposedly had. My brother told me that a few weeks into the investigation, they had found the little boy who was with the man. His body had been cruelly dumped in the woods, and the cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration. If my brother and I had gone with that man, we likely would have met the same fate. That meant he had other partners who would have helped him snatch up unsuspecting kids. His real parents had already been searching for their missing son for almost a month. The sick man used him as his puppet to try and take other children. So to the man I saw all those years ago, you had better hope that we never meet again. I made it my resolution earlier this year to get back in shape. Unfortunately, I've had to work crazy hours, and by the time I get off work, the gyms are already closed. That changed when I was driving home at night and saw a gym sign saying, "Now open 24/7. I decided to pull up, grabbed my bag from the trunk, and headed inside. I almost turned around because there was no one at the front desk and literally no one in the gym either. Half the fluorescents were on and there was music playing, so I figured the employee was on a break or something, and I went to the locker room to get changed. Everything was a mess. The free weights were all over the place, yoga mats had come undone, cleaning bottles had all been knocked over, and one of them had leaked all over the treadmill. It just looked like the gym had been open all day and the employee had said, "Screw it, I'm not cleaning this mess." So I just hopped on the elliptical and started my workout. I was about 15 minutes in when the battery on my iPod finally died. At least there was music playing, some hip-hop song I've never heard of before. I could have sworn I heard something in the silence between songs and that sounded like a whimper. But I convinced myself it was just the side effect of a creepy empty gym. That was my mistake. I went back to lifting weights when suddenly the power went out, but only for a second. To be honest, it scared me half to death. I nearly dropped the bar I was holding. As soon as the lights came back on, I was able to hear the whimpers I thought I heard earlier. It drew my attention to the supply closet near the main desk. I grabbed the free weight just in case, approached the door, and loudly asked, "You okay in there?" The whimpering stopped immediately, like the person on the other side was trying to conceal their presence. She looked like a student, 19, 20. She was wearing an employee t-shirt and was curled up in the far corner of the room. I tossed the weight aside and lifted my hands to show her I meant no harm, and she kinda just stared at me for a few seconds before she got this glint of recognition in her eyes. She got up briskly, grabbed my arm and said, "We have to get out of here now." I tried to explain that I needed to change, but she wouldn't hear it. She only stopped when I pointed out I left my car keys in my locker. I heard her whisper that there was no time, but she looked like she was weighing things in her mind. Okay, she decided. We'll go together, but we have to leave before it comes back. The word "it" caught my attention. It was about 11 p.m. and she hadn't seen a customer in over an hour. She was bored, so she started tidying up, putting the weights back in place, when all of a sudden, she heard the bar from the bench crash to the ground. She figured the last person who used it hadn't placed it back on the rack properly. She was sure someone was running around and making a mess and then dodging out of sight. She tried looking at the mirrors to try and catch them in the act. She caught a silhouette standing on the opposite side of the gym. All of a sudden, a weight was being thrown across the floor. Weights flew past her. She ducked into the nearby supply closet and tried to hide. She could hear objects pelting against the door. There was a loud knock, and then it all went quiet. She sat there in horror for a few minutes before she mustered the courage to leave. But something was blocking the door. She couldn't see very well out of the crack, but it looked like one of the weight machines had been dragged all the way to the closet and had been dropped there. And then there was me, around midnight, entering the gym. Now I've got to be honest, there was nothing blocking the door to the supply closet when I got there. I don't know if she imagined it or if it got moved or what. That's why I was a little skeptical and why I was reluctant to believe her story. I was ready to dismiss the whole thing, but as we left the locker room and headed towards the front door, I ran into the gym, only to find the mirrors shattered into pieces, with not a soul in sight. The employee walked over and put a hand on my shoulder, urging me to leave. I wanted to. I really did, but I'd become rooted into the ground in horror. I swear to you on everything I hold dear, as I stood over those hundreds of broken chunks of mirror, I could see our reflections staring back at us from every angle, and in some of them, only some, I saw a dark figure standing behind us. Emmy's roommate Lucy is a slovenly, food-stealing, clothing-destroying waste of carbon. Emmy dealt with it by keeping her space clean and ignoring her areas, storing her food at work, and installing a lock on her bedroom door so she couldn't borrow her outfits. All of that made Lucy a bad roommate, but she had her workarounds and she had the one saving grace of being quiet at night, so Emmy put up with it. She put up with it until she broke their cardinal roommate rule. No one gets a key to the apartment without both roommates agreeing. The rule was sacred. Emmy couldn't even give a key to her boyfriend for more than a year. And unbeknownst to her, Lucy had met a guy online who lived several hours away, and within 2 weeks of meeting him, she invites him to meet in real life and stay over for the weekend. Lucy then decides to mail this strange man a key to their apartment because he was going to get into town before she got off work. A man she talked to for only 2 weeks, had never actually met, and Emmy didn't know about, now had a key to their shared apartment, and Lucy wasn't going to be there to greet him. But Emmy was. She started doing her laundry while wearing only a robe as she was getting ready to shower right after. Suddenly, she hears the lock snick. Emmy turns around and sees the door swing open to reveal a thin-looking guy in a trench coat who just stood there silently, while Emmy froze like a rabbit. Emmy screamed and chucked the laundry detergent at his head before scrambling into her bedroom and locking the door. He yelled that it's okay. I'm Lucy's boyfriend, he said. I don't care who you are, Emmy screamed. Get out of here or I'm calling the cops and my boyfriend. The random strange man in a trench coat leaves and, to his credit, even locks the door behind him. Emmy calls Lucy and asks her if he's her boyfriend and if she gave him a key. She said he was, and she did. She then gushes about how they met, but Emmy got more and more irritated the longer she went on. Emmy calls her boyfriend and he comes over, helping her pack up the essentials so she can move in with him that day. There were no apologies or even excuses from Lucy when Emmy came back to the house to grab the rest of her stuff the following week. She yells at Emmy that it's her fault that she overreacted and said, "You're lucky my boyfriend didn't press charges for the mild concussion her laundry detergent gave him." Now, Emmy is slow to show her true anger, but this was the last straw, and Lucy needs to pay. So the 2-year lease is in her name only because Lucy's credit is so bad that nowhere in the good part of town would take her. She had been living with her parents over an hour away from her job for months before they started rooming together. Hindsight tells Emmy this is because no one else would room with her prior, so there's nothing legally preventing Emmy from subletting the apartment for the remaining 14 months on the lease. She could also evict Lucy, but that wouldn't be nearly as fun as what Emmy decided to do instead. She posted a roommate ad on Craigslist and made it quite the deal. She will keep her original deposit on file and pay the first 2 months' rent and sublet fee, on the condition that they know they're living with a food-thieving, clothing-destroying slob. Emmy may want revenge, but isn't willing to sucker some innocent person into it. Over the next couple weeks, she got a few nibbles, but no one had the flavor she was looking for to match Lucy. Then, Emmy gets a message from Kevin. Kevin goes down her list of warnings. He doesn't care about food thieving, he orders takeout and hates leftovers, and for obvious reasons, Kevin isn't worried about Lucy borrowing his clothes. And Kevin admits that he's a huge slob as well, and not having to pay attention to it is actually a plus. Kevin says the 2 months rent seems kind of excessive and there must be more to the story if Emmy was willing to pay that on top of the deposit and the sublet fee. So Emmy tells Kevin the rest of the story. He tells her he'll take the deal, but she should know something about him. Kevin says he is very happily active in the singles scene, not looking to settle down, but very much looking to continue bringing home a revolving door of F-buddies. Sometimes they'll stay for a couple days or a week at a time, so it's good to know the key rule isn't really that big of a deal. Emmy tells him it sounds like he and Lucy will be a good roommate match. Kevin fills out the paperwork, the leasing office does his credit/background check and gives it the green light. And finally, Emmy then mails Kevin her key. Kevin moves in. Emmy gets a frantic call from Lucy about a strange man showing up saying he lives there with her now. She told her that's right, he does, and explains the subletting process. Lucy starts raging at her, but Emmy hangs up and mutes her calls. Over the next few days, she gets a lot of voicemails, some raging, some whining, some begging. Lucy has been forced to clean and take out the trash like a slave or something because Kevin doesn't bother. Lucy can't move out because she can't get a lease anywhere else and her parents won't let her move back home. Lucy has to keep paying her half of the rent because Kevin told her if she stopped, he would change the locks and move all her stuff out. And after a few weeks of radio silence, Lucy calls again and Emmy decides to pick up. She tells her she's so happy to get a hold of her. Kevin is now bringing men home every couple nights, and sometimes they don't leave for days and days. Emmy hears her out and calmly responds, "Yeah, having a roommate who hands out keys without your consent to guys you don't know is a bit, isn't it?"